0 things that have my home post office box as the address. 0. But because of the purchasing, they used the purchasing address and they shipped it. I found it weeks later stuffed into the post office box down the street. And at that point, they refunded my money. So I was like, well, I guess I kind of stole a stuffy. But it's kind of their fault for sending it to the wrong address, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm surprised you.
Yeah, like your bed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's with these companies?
Hey, well, this one came all the way from China.
No.
So communicating wasn't the clearest. Anyway, pretty sure it was like a Google Translate scenario. But so I think I accidentally stole something. What about you, Ryan O'Donnell? I have a sneaking suspicion you were a thief.
Ow.
I would have put it.
No. Well, yes, but no, not from a store. In fact, I would like to hold myself to something here. One time at Shoppers Drug Mart, I bought lip balm, but the cashier forgot to scan the lip balm, and I took it out of the bag and put it on the counter and it said, scan that, and did a whole separate transaction for $3 because I felt guilty about it.
$3
It's
for
like
lip
a weird
balm.
thing that
Jesus,
hangs over me. I feel like if I steal, bad juju. It's going to bite me, even the smallest thing. So I avoid it at all costs. The only thing I have stolen was I had this friend in elementary school named Brady. Brady, if you're listening, I'm sorry. You had the coolest monster truck toy ever because when you ran it into a wall, it had a little spring and it would make the monster truck crush in on itself. So it was like constantly crushing. And I was so jealous of it that I did steal it from his cubby hole.
Man,
yeah.
The first thing I ever stolen from me was I had a Motley Crue CD or tape.
Motherfucker.
It was Motley Crue tape.
You can't
and
buy
someone
those
stole
anymore,
that from
can
school.
you?
I couldn't believe it. I looked everywhere. It did not occur to me that somebody would steal my tape, but someone did. It's heartbreaking. Okay, coming up later on the shift, these things can be life-altering for us. We carry the burden of Ryan stealing the crushable monster truck from Brady for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, shut up.
So much so that he holds himself accountable for a $3 lip chap. So what about if you're a bank robber? How much guilt do you think you carry, if any, when you're robbing banks? Okay, so a bank robber, I've always thought maybe they rip off 1 or 2 banks, they take their money off, they go. And if you watch the movies, the score is always so big. They always get a bunch of money and off they go, right? Well, what if you robbed 30 banks or even more than 30 banks? Because that's all they ask you about. We have a former bank robber,
Jesus
on the shift
Can
tonight.
you fuck off, Jomo?
He's going to explain to us why he did it, how he did it, what he loved about it, and why he turned himself into the FBI. This is a man who is on America's top 10 most wanted.
What the fuck? I'm supposed to get confused.
Turned himself into the FBI, and how he's turned himself, his life around, into something completely different.
Idiot. Why would you turn yourself in? If you got away with it.
I don't think that would be I would probably just be.
If you got away with it. If you actually got away with it, which nobody does.
But how?
Den Eltern was sagen schreib mir meine Flausen auf, ich will so gern erwachsen werden und mich schon mit 18 sterben. Hey! Aber mach die Augen auf, noch bin ich nicht aus dem Haus.
773999898. What have you stolen?
What would make you never see me driving?
Before we get to that, though, these are some of the stories, the biggest stories of Thursday, May 13th, 2021, in your all-night headlines.
Here's your all-night headlines.
It's gonna be good, motherfucker.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did not break federal ethic rules in his handling of the now canceled We Charity contract. According to the former Finance Minister Bill Morneau did. We heard a little bit about it at the top hour. Here's more details. According to a report issued by the Federal Ethics Commissioner, Mario Dion, David Aiken has the report.
Well, Donna, Trudeau was calling it a win, but the PM's political opponents say his role in the We Charity scandal still stinks. Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion found Trudeau did not advance either his own or his family's interests when his government decided to award the We charity a contract worth more than $40 million to run a pandemic emergency program to provide $900 million in grants to post-secondary students. And in making that conclusion, Dion cleared Trudeau of ethics violations in the We scandal. Trudeau had no public events Thursday, but in a statement he said, "This confirms what I have been saying from the beginning. My job as Prime Minister is to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes by providing direct support to people and businesses to get through this." Not so, says the opposition.
They breached ethics to help their friends, and it hurts students because students still haven't received the $1 billion promised to help them out.
Prime Minister Trudeau himself said he was in a conflict of interest in the We scandal, a perception of conflict of interest. His family was paid, family members were paid $500,000, and he was involved in a decision of a non-tendered contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars to those people who paid his family.
Trudeau's former finance minister, Bill Morneau, was found to have violated the conflict of interest law after Dion determined We charity founders Craig and Mark Kielberger were legally friends of Morneau's, and Morneau's actions were judged to have advanced their interests. Commissioner Dion's findings come with no penalty. There's no fines, just another black mark on Morneau's time in office.
Like they were on
Despite
Facebook.
the ruling in Trudeau's favor, his opponents want to make the We charity matter another ethics black mark against Trudeau to go with his other two ethics violations, the Aga Khan vacation in the Bahamas and the SNC Lavalin matter. Donna?
All right, David, thanks.
Oh, David, Donna, thanks for joining us here on the shift. It must be Friday. It's a beautiful thing. Justin Trudeau sidestepping another controversy. Go figure, hey? Teflon Trudeau, maybe. That could be the nickname for him. Or, I'd hate to be his friend because all of his friends always seem up under the proverbial Greyhound bus. All right, news out of China and the two Michaels through a lens of Julia and Kevin Garrett. This is a Canadian couple who spent months in a Chinese prison in 2014. They lived there for a very long time, then got arrested. They're painting a clearer picture of the situation that's facing Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Jeff Semple, host of the new global news podcast China Rising, reports on Canadians who've become caught in political crossfire.
For nearly 2.5 years, the two Michaels have remained out of reach. Canadian Spavor and Kovrig, accused by Beijing of spying. Their trials held behind closed doors. Their ordeal difficult to even imagine. But not for Julia and Kevin Garrett.
Our situation is very similar to the Michaels.
The Canadian couple lived in China for 3 decades before their arrest in 2014, accused of spying following the arrest of a Chinese suspect in Canada at the request of the United States. The Garretts were held in separate cells, interrogated for 6 hours every day.
They threatened execution many times.
They each kept diaries.
In John 15,
Kevin wrote Bible verses about hope, while Julia scribbled pictures of anything she was grateful for.
Like, I heard a bird outside. I heard like some chirping of a bird, so I drew like a few birds. Because the other alternative is you get lost in bitterness, anger, rage, and I knew that wasn't a good choice.
But as the months dragged on, their notes grew darker.
Like, you get into this more deep, deep despair.
After 7 months, Julia was released, but not Kevin. Like the Michaels, his trial was also closed to the public, which he believes is actually a positive.
if it was a public trial, meaning there are spectators, it will not go away. They're going to make an example of you.
Kevin was later convicted of spying, but unbeknownst to him, political relations were warming. The Chinese suspect in Canada suddenly pleaded guilty, and Prime Minister Trudeau visited China amid talk of a possible trade deal. 2 weeks later, Kevin was released, reunited with his family. The Garretts say the government's quiet backdoor diplomacy helped to secure their release.
So their approach was extremely diplomatic, and so it wasn't in the media.
They're doing it differently with the two Michaels. Some quiet action, but more in the news and in their face.
But even when it seems insurmountable, their story is a reminder of how quickly the winds can change.
I think I would say you hold on. It will not last forever.
Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
You can listen to China Rising on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Thanks, Donna. It is interesting to look at that lens. This particular case with the two Michaels ties into a couple of pieces of the puzzle we can't forget in that why it's so difficult. Number one is international security with Huawei and accusations of some nasty stuff in international security. Plus, Trump, when he was the president with China, plus sanctions, plus so much more. So it was a normal situation inflamed, and here we are dealing with it. I hope they're right, and I hope there's a whole lot of quiet politics going on. The U.S. Center for Disease Control down in the States says it's now safe for fully vaccinated Americans to go maskless in most indoor and outdoor settings.
Thank you for listening to Case.
For economic and social development.
Several batches of new professions have been added to China's occupation list since 2015, when the country unveiled its latest edition of occupational classifications. The professions are mostly in public health sector and emerging industries such as blockchain technicians, online marketers, and information security testers. Liu Baocheng is a professor with the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. He says new jobs emerge as a result of new industries and is also a way to keep pace with economic and social development.
This is primarily due to the structural changes going on in the labor market, because new industries begin to emerge, particularly in the area of information industry. So therefore, you notice the new professions like blockchain engineer, the wine tester, food manager, etc., etc. So this is a good sign for the high quality development.
Are saying that, of course, more crowded areas, masks are still can.
Augenringe schleppen, doch will nicht schlafen, ey. 1000 Stimmen, sie ertrinken in dem Glas voll Hate. Sie hat immer noch nichts an, außer das Lachen, ey. Blaue Pille sagt dem Himmel, er soll warten, ja, ja. Augenringe schleppen, doch will nicht schlafen, ey. 1000 Stimmen, sie ertrinken in dem Glas voll Hate. Sie hat immer noch nichts an, außer das Lachen, ey. Blaue Pille sagt dem Himmel, er soll warten, ja, ja. Living the streets, shut me up with the head. That's all my team.
Text coming up next, plus a conversation for you about this. What's your Greyhound story? Everyone has a Greyhound story. Greyhound's been a part of our lives for so long. Greyhound has pulled the pin from all things Canada, except for trips in and out of America once that reopens. So they started to shut down. Now they've completely shut down. And what's your Greyhound story? 877-399-9898. Calls and texts next. It's The Shift. I'm Shane Hewitt.
I know it's over for me.
Don't feel my gunshot.
I'm not in too deep.
We're here for the night owls and the really early risers. It's The Shift with Shane Hewitt.
Rather than leaving them behind at home in remote areas, Cao Bing reports.
Hello.
For Li Tingting and her family, the most anticipated moment in the week is the video call with their son. In his first year at a private boarding school in Hengshui, about 250 kilometers south of Beijing, they see each other once a month. The family decided to send their 6-year-old boy to the school last September. It was a tough decision, but to a family of migrant workers, it seemed the best choice.
We are from Henan province. We moved to Beijing 10 years ago and started our small business recycling renewable resources. We have no Beijing household registration, so our child can't attend public schools in Beijing. That's why we chose this boarding school in nearby city. It's quite far away, but at least I'm not leaving my son back in Henan.
Not leaving the child behind, this is Li Tingting's bottom line, as she didn't want her child to experience what she went through in her own childhood. In the 1990s, her parents were among the great influx of migrant workers into the big cities, and she was left behind.
My parents came to Beijing when I was very little, and I grew up with my grandparents in Henan.
She could only see her parents once or twice a year, but the journey to Hengshui is half the distance, and family reunions are more frequent. Hengshui Qiming School accepts school-age migrant children regardless of their household registration. Many other migrant children are studying and living here. Li Tingting's son has plenty of fun learning and playing with.
On Monday, a pro subs.
He's dead, man.
Better sparkle.
Age migrant children by 2020. About 85% have got equal opportunity for public education in big cities, while 50% did not. The ministry says it plans to ensure that children of migrant workers can all be accommodated. As for the future, Li Tingting has her own plans.
My little daughter is now 1 year old. When she's older, I want to send her to the school in Hengshui too. Then the two children can look after each other, and we can see them in regularly.
Li says her family is considering moving its household registration to Hengshui. She says home is where the family is.
It's helping reporting on a story of migrant families that choose to send their children to schools in nearby cities. A program designed to assist COVID-19 vaccinations for Chinese citizens abroad is being rolled out smoothly in several African countries. Wenjie has more.
The program, dubbed Spring Sprout, was launched in Mauritius early this week to help over 700 Chinese citizens living in the island nation to gain access to a COVID-19 vaccination. Active
With an L.
And Caleb loves seamless experiences, which is why he booked a virtual appointment with a certified diamond consultant from Spence.
Caleb likes things stress-free.
From 2,500 designs, Caleb was able to build a perfect, one-of-a-kind engagement ring for Jenny.
That was easy peasy.
All Caleb needs to do now is propose.
Wait, what? Hey, my palms are getting sweaty.
Jenny's ring is backed by the famous Spence Lifetime Guarantee. You know, just in case.
In case of what? Caleb is feeling verklempt.
Deep breath, Caleb. Deeper.
Caleb has regained his composure.
Ready to take the big step? Call or visit SpenceDiamonds.com to book your virtual appointment. See you soon on Zoom. Say yes!
At True Tone Electronics, we know this has been a difficult time for everyone. Your safety is our #1 priority. Our showroom is currently closed, but our professional staff are available via email at sales@truetone.ca or by phone at 905-2 to answer any questions.
You're gonna buy jewelry over Zoom. You're gonna buy jewelry over video chat. Very interesting. How the fuck do you do that? Oh, that sounds horrible. It can't be that much longer.
Outdoor-Bekleidung für echte Männer. Jede Jahreszeit und jedes Wetter. Herrenoutdoor.de bietet dir preiswerte Bekleidung zum Wohlfühlen. Nur echte Männer bestellen unter herrenoutdoor.de. Herrenoutdoor.de, der Onlineshop für echte Männer. Jetzt bestellen!
Sie hat ein Auge auf mein Fluss, doch ich brauche keinen Schutz. Nein, ich habe meine Vor meiner Haustür wieder ein Haufen Bullen. Ja, diese Hunde, sie sind auf der Suche nach dem Pum-Pum. Dicke vorbei mit Depri, fliege über Skyline mit Heli. Immer mit dabei, mein Baby. Ai, ohne sie geht nicht, ohne sie geht nicht. Es fühlt sich so gut an, halt ich mein Mädchen an der Hüfte. Meine Kleine, meine Hübsche, ja, nur ein Schuss reicht, Baby. Das Gelaber ist vorbei, bye. Glaub mir, ein Schuss reicht, Baby. Und du hast kein Wort mehr von ihm, nein. Keine Ficke meiner Pumpe. Keine Ficke meiner Pumpe. Keine Ficke meiner Pumpe. Keine Ficke meiner Pumpe.
Das Seidenhemd von Johnny, Bluesband aus Abu Dhabi. Meine Pum-Pum schmeckt wie Wasabi. Bei Harakets, bei Tsunami. Arm, MC Yachtmaster. Album ist fertig, ich schwör in der Yachtmaster. Kudos machen Welle, Mashallah. Grüße gehen an Aiko, an Hazard. Es gibt nix umsonst, meine Pum klärt zwischen uns die Balance. Und egal wer kommt, glaub mir, er fängt eine Kugel als Buffon. Danke Gott, dass ich alles überlebt hab und die Fänge vom Welt sich weiter drehen darf. Sagt, wer glaubte, dass wir's mal auf weit bringen. Rachler zu ab, bis es rein ist.
Keine Ficke meiner Pumpe. Keine Ficke meiner Pumpe.
Now you didn't beat me to hang.
Das ist Casino Royale.
Willst du mich kriegen, wenn ich mit 600 PS durch die Straßen flieg? Schwarze Blätter ist im Seitenspiegel, die Rollen kommen und bin auf der Jagd, Casino Royale, die kriegen auf Mars, das ist nicht normal, ich werde nicht schwarz, niemals mein Name, ich bin auf der Jagd, Casino Royale, die kriegen auf Mars, das ist nicht normal, ich werde nicht schwarz, niemals mein Name, ich bin auf der Jagd. Was jetzt? Ihr dachtet alle, ich bin weg. Dass ich nicht lache, macht die Platte hier, zieht dann fresh. Relax, keine Sorge, Kreis wird geflext. Wenn dich das catcht, schreib mir eine Nachricht auf Instagram. Deswegen, ich mache damit nur ein paar Cent. Verkauf locker im Monat 10 Grad. Alles verdoppelt sich ohne Fähigkeit. Meine History, digitales System absteckt. Diese Killermaschine macht über 10 Jahren Rap. Die Videos selber und chill bequem am Set. Mein Imperium wächst und alle 10 Grad Cash. Und ich kann keine Finden mit LED-Tanz. Ich bin auf der Jagd, Casino Royale, die kriegen auf Mars, das ist nicht normal, ich werde nicht schwarz, niemals mein Name, ich bin auf der Jagd, Casino Royale, die kriegen auf Mars, das ist nicht normal, ich werde nicht schwarz, niemals mein Name, ich bin auf der Jagd. Guten Morgen, meine Ladies, heute wirst du aus dem Shade fliegen, wirklich dort aus den 80s, CEO, Trippz, so wie Jay-Z, New York, Knicks ohne Flip-Sleeves, immer so fett wie die Navy, ich komm in deine City ohne Bodyguard, Ficker, alles wie ein Kamehameha. Ich hab alles da, wir spielen Blackjack. Nimm dir 100 Mille aus deinem Cashback. Zieh die Cat und puste alle weg. erklärt, gab mein Leben für dieses Tuchwerk. Too fresh, jeder einzelne Pass, ein Bootleg. Schreit ein, weil ich über Tuchwerk bin auf der Jagd, Ich geh noch royal, ich krieg Mars, was ist nicht normal, Ich bin nicht schwarz, niemand mein Name, ich bin auf der Jagd, Ich geh noch royal, ich krieg Mars, was ist nicht normal, Ich bin nicht schwarz, niemand mein Name, ich bin auf der Jagd. Wie willst du mich kriegen, wenn ich mit 600 PS durch die Straßen zieh? Schwarze Bett ist, unser Spiegel, wir wollen kommen, wollen folgen mit der Guck auf die Kette, ist keine Lüge. Wasser, Chille, Zentrum, check mein, Coca, Take off, es gut, Silber. Es so, immer noch drei. Talking around, aber ein Motiv, aller wie Tori. Es nur dies, denk so Es gibt auch viel Versuchen, nicht mit Bildern. Ich schieß dich auf, alle meine Feinde zittern. Es gibt Gas, viele wollen mich dran hindern. So viel Hass, zu viel Wörter sind da getan. Ich soll mit Frau da absetzen, ob ich schaffe unterm Bett. Es geht nun auf die Stelle. Warum redest du so viel, Kollege? Ich muss es alleine schaffen. Das berührt mich ab, Kollege, du gehst alleine schaffen. Ja, ich komme mit ein volles Magazin. Ferraris, diese Klacker.
McAllister almost collapsed as a new outburst of coughing convulsed him. When he recovered, the desire to get away from his diggings and to reach the town of Dawson became paramount in his mind. He placed the unfinished letter in an envelope and placed it unsealed in a large wallet which he carried in the pocket of his parka. Hours later, miles from his starting point, and now on the main trail to Dawson, Jim McAllister collapsed. Wait. They stopped their sled a short distance from the spot where Jim McAllister lay sprawled in the snow beside his wailing dog.
Oh, is this dog? I thought it was wolves coming. You just ruined it for me.
Greyhound bus with that guy that got decapitated by the city. Yeah, so
this one call 3 times tonight.
It was a very sad scene, and they're still fighting for justice because he's on his own.
He changed his name.
Yeah, well, I don't know the details of specifically of the case of the guy who did that. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk about that guy today. But I do want to, if it does come up, I do want to acknowledge Tim McLean and the fact that he was, that's the story that many of us are left with. But there are many good stories about Greyhound. I mean, heartbreaking and unfortunate and unnecessary and dreadful what happened to Tim McLean. 877-399-9898. Your calls, your text messages, welcome here. In that piece of the clip there, they talked about that we're marking new territory when Greyhound Air was starting to happen. I remember that commercial, and it was a Greyhound dog peeing on a tire of an airplane. Wow. I always thought that was pretty creative. Yeah, wow. And we're marking new territory. It was peeing on an airplane. It was the front landing gear. Never forget that one. Catherine is in Surrey. Hey, Kath.
Hey, I saw my girlfriend.
Same fucking girl again.
We had such a beautiful time together. And okay, it's Christmas, you know. I had to say goodbye, and it was sad because I've been buds with her for years, like 30 years. So I ended up going home. It's quiet on the bus. Like, there was only like a few of us, like maybe 3 or 4. And I was dying because the guy lit up a joint in the bathroom, and I have asthma, and I can't use a puffer because I'm allergic to the chemicals in it. My adrenaline goes out of control.
Oh, like Ventolin, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so I'm sure I never came that close to dying. So I couldn't open the window. There was only a couple of people that just sat on there and they got in the bathroom. And
that's the way they used to set up. We're gonna revamp these buses. We're gonna buy these buses.
I bring it through my sweater, then through my shirt, and then
Schwartzen. There we go.
Oh
Schwartzen.
God! Yeah, I was very close. Very.
Catherine, thank you very much for sharing your story.
Find a way to make a stick figure of a dog.
Before you go. Your text said, Sears came to my house with an empty truck. I ordered a washer and dryer.
Oh.
I didn't know. Did you steal the truck or did you steal the washer and dryer?
I felt like just phoning up and saying, look, dude, I paid for this or I didn't get it, and I didn't pay for it yet, right? Right. So, yeah, the truck shows up and he rolls out the door and I'm like, oh, we can't deliver it because there's nothing in here. No, the guy in the morning didn't load it in the morning.
Oh, I got it. All right, cool. All right, thanks, Catherine. Great to hear your voice. You have a fantastic night. My buddy Catherine in Surrey, 877-399-9898. Your calls, your text messages here on the shift.
Her story sucked.
Let's go to Barbara. She's in Kamloops, Radio NL.
It's going to be the same girl.
Barbara, how are you?
Hi there. How are you tonight?
1:40 in the morning.
I'm wonderful. Tell me your story about right now.
I took a trip a few years ago up to Edmonton from Kamloops, and I went up there in like on an afternoon kind of thing, or an evening bus rather, and the guy sitting beside me had been in prison for killing somebody. Sorry, behind me, and he was going to visit his real parents who he hadn't seen since he was a kid. He was brought up in foster care, and he had these poems that he was reading all of them to his seatmates. Then I came back the next day, and it was daytime, and it was full of ladies crocheting blankets.
Oh, yeah, so what a difference.
Yeah, it was a real contrast. But that's my story.
Amazing. But you made it, and you're here to tell it later. Thank you, Barbara. Thanks for listening.
Hey, no problem. Good night.
877-399-9890 from Kamloops right there. The conversation of that commercial.
A lot of killing associated with buses.
Greyhound was becoming an airline. From old John and Burnaby, great show, guys. That ad was great about Greyhound. The caption was, we've got a leg up on our competition. It actually made the Johnny Carson show, too cool. It was neat. It was really neat. And it was, the Greyhound was peeing on the front tire of the airplane. It is sort of an end of an air.
Picture out of McAllister's wallet. My, she was nice.
Would you like to, there's always been talk about high-speed train between Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto. And would, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, maybe? Is it time for us to get with it and fast forward here? I'm not sure.
The signals won't keep up with the trains.
Yeah, a story coming in with no name attached to it that I can see here. Sorry, quickly. It says, when I first moved to Nanton, Alberta, I had no vehicle, but I thought, no problem. I'll just rent a car as I need it for work, and I'm just going to Calgary. I could take the Greyhound. Problem was, there was no official Greyhound stop in Nanton, so I thought I would just flag the bus down. The first time I did, the driver said, pay me when we get to Calgary. I never did pay him. We never did ask for payment, nor did any of the other drivers. The 10 or so times I took the bus to town, so I guess that's my Greyhound story and my theft story.
How do you assholes get away with this shit?
Stealing rides in the Greyhound. Let's go to Dan. Who's
they do it on the GO train now. They sit in the washroom the whole fucking trip.
Oh, I was the victim of the. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can, Dan. Sounds good.
Okay, cool. I was working in the lumber mills in BC for about 25 years, and I had too many vehicles, and I'm from Alberta, so I had to take a vehicle and then take the bus back. I never took a Greyhound in my life, but when I sat in the front seat and I saw the mountains, going through the mountains, I had to drive, so I applied Kamloops, Prince George, Calgary, and Edmonton, and I got accepted in Edmonton. And yeah, end of an era. It was so nice to see the wildlife, the crops growing. I'm gonna miss that. I've seen cougars and bears and snakes and hawks and so many rabbits. But I have a story that is kind of paranormal almost. I was going to Grand Prairie one night, and some girl come up to the front, and she said, "Hey, the bathroom is been shut for quite a while. There's a lady in there, and she's just been in there a while." So I pulled the bus over, and went, and the door was locked, and I knocked on the door. We couldn't open the door, and then there was a great big whoosh sound, you know, like a whoosh, just like, you know, if you flushed a big toilet. And then the door opened, and there was nobody inside there. And I said, "Okay, you can use it now." And then she said, "No, I'm not going in there."
Wait, you can teleport, but you're on the back of a bus?
I feel that the reason I feel that Greyhound went down is because
too many people disappear and die.
Deal with the government, and when they started granting other companies, I won't mention, when they let them do the juicy cream runs between the big cities, that took a major portion of Greyhound. And then Greyhound had to keep the little milk runs and delivering stuff with trailers, and that's basically what took away Greyhound subsidizing the trips to the small towns, and now there's nothing covering those little towns anymore. And it definitely was an era
serial killer's paradise.
I feel really sad to see it go.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. Thank you very much for the story.
Well, we're just going to drive this bus up and down roads randomly, picking up hitchhikers. I appreciate that one, 877-399-9898. Those, not only, Greyhound was slow at adopting technology too, because those buses came in for those juicy routes, as you described it, and they also had internet. A lot of times, and ways to charge your devices. They weren't quick on adopting those things. That was also impactful. But Greyhound Courier, in and around your region, was a pretty great way. We used to send all of our packages up to family in Fort McMurray and whatnot for Christmas on the Greyhound Courier inside the trailer. So the only
interesting insight, man. I've always thought that when I retire and I'm an old man, I'll probably be a bus driver. Like I will probably drive a tour bus or something like that, or maybe a hockey bus. Seriously, like to a point now where I'm looking at my licensing going, well, why don't I get my licensing now? And then I'm ready. And then if I ever decide, you know what, radio, I mean, I could do radio on the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Winnipeg. I could do that. There's a future there. Telling you, no one's going to give me grief for stumbling on my words. You're going to be playing your own podcast on the PA. Sure. We'll be right back with more on the shift.
You've been hit by a smooth criminal. It's dark out, but we'll keep the lights on. It's The Shift with Shane Hewitt.
We are girls forever!
In 1990, we took a bus from Vancouver to 100 Mile House. You hear me? 100 Mile House in BC. And we took the bus back as well because my mother wasn't taking any chances at all because we were so far from home, and she was with me, and there was blockades of the rail lines. And nothing happened while we were out there, but she wasn't taking the chance we'd be stuck on a train. I don't understand anything they're saying. They might be programming my brain. Damn it. I don't know how to fix this. Fuck it. What is this? I'm not using that stupid system bar, you fucking retard. You are fucking. You fuck off and kill yourself, Chomo. Jesus Christ. Even the fucking hackers are trying to outthink what I'm gonna do to fucking. If. Wave me your Chomo flag.
Lives in these perilous times, confusion binds the minds of world leaders. We need a sign, a ray of hope through this dark cloud.
You're not a hacker, you're just a Chomo.
Yo, packing the packages, the water coming disastrous. I'm getting bottles of water and matches, cause it's hazardous, immaculate hate. I'm watching you versus the capitalist room, and the generations and nations are going at it. I'm on the front lines of these perilous times, confusion binds the minds of world leaders. We need a sign, a ray of hope through this dark cloud of injustice. Motherfuck this city of gold that the foreman is lusted, jewel and crescent green.
Fuck.
Yeah. We got Onyx in the house. And in a gun battle, just revolution. Yo, packing the packages, the water coming disastrous. I'm getting bottles of water and matches, cause it's hazardous, immaculate hate. I'm watching you versus the capitalist room, and the generations and nations are going at it. I'm on the front lines of these perilous times, confusion binds the minds of world leaders. We need a sign, a ray of hope through this dark cloud of injustice. Motherfuck this city of gold that the foreman is lusted, jewel and crescent green beans, apocalypse. Can't you see the blitz on the radar? Missile hits, overconfident. War strategists became the catalyst, angry capitalists. The stock market's fast. Gotta get it ready, my body is so steady, heart heavy from living so long. In these last days, crusades herself, gotta selling ourselves short, gotta afford lifestyles that ended something. We let the mic breathe, like the dying breeze in need. We feed words that breed hope, maneuver past the greed and lead. We made the eagle fly, we made freedom cry by watching Jim try to see in the eye. Fucking alibi, we was there on the balcony and shots blare. My mission was scarred, but we still here. It's something for the people, y'all. Do you remember when Martin had a dream and Bobby had a regiment? It's evident the struggle's on. My thoughts are settling, I gotta play the part. Ain't no other role, I'm better at words are better than revolutionary medicine. I took one pill and the shit was on ever since. I'm trying to keep an open mind. In the wilderness, I hold a sign. Wisdom is war and it's open mind. Older minds put me on to wisdom priceless. The fight opposite the whirlwind till you're lifeless. Look, the game plans to defeat the man. Fuck trying to beat the man. I navigate seas and to freedom land. Get at me, people, if you're trying to soothe the pain. But if not, move over, cause I'm trying to see change. It's the raven that never came back to the ark, hanging out with the viper at the garden and eating that anger the god. Show who you really are, moving the clips in the store. Precise one, reborn, scorned by human flaws. So who is this saying that money is bliss? Your logical miss. You and the devil about to kiss, I dismiss. Motherfuckers leading our brothers through streets and gutters, overflowing from tears for my mothers that fall as they witness no death of their children. While they alive and realize they fell victim to American nightmare. Daring to dream things ain't never what they seem. Can we ever redeem? Hold on to old principles and still remain sensible. Analog art became digital. Packing the packages, the war order coming disastrous. I'm getting bottles of water and matches cause it's hazardous, immaculate. And Montague's versus the capitalist rooming in generations and nations are going at it. I'm on the front lines of these perilous times, confusion binds the minds of world leaders. We need a sign. Oh.
There we go. Let's do this again. We may well be the most harassed channel on here. I've never seen a video once of a channel being harassed like we get harassed. It's 5:55 o'clock.
The rest of the journey.
It's the same girl again!
I've been on the Greyhound more than once.
With 8 different voices, 8 different heads. It's one girl with 8 heads.
Thank you very much, Leslie. They have been really good at that, that's for sure. Maybe that's one of the reasons why.
Where you folk through this dark cloud of injustice, motherfuck this city of gold that the foreman is lusted. Jewel encrusted green beans, apocalypse, can't you? Yo, packing the packages, the war order coming disastrous. I'm getting bottles of water and matches cause it's hazardous, immaculate hate. And Montague's versus the capitalist rooming in generations and nations are going at it. I'm on the front lines of these perilous times, confusion binds the minds of world leaders. We need a sign. Array of folk through this dark cloud of injustice, motherfuck this city of gold that the foreman is lusted. Jewel encrusted green beans, apocalypse, can't you see the blitz on the radar?
To find.
Be about 8 o'clock. When you spray the block, it's mad hot. You'll have the spot got locked. Ooh, I shot a little nigga bill from down the hill. We had a 135. I heard you might not survive before. Be about 8 o'clock. When you spray the block, it's mad hot. You'll have the spot got locked. Ooh, I shot a little nigga bill from down the hill. We had a 135. I heard you might not survive before.
That was interesting. Oh, that might be the whole sample, right?
It's a throwback. Yeah. Now when match up, watch people match up. I swear to God, I should be dead from all the pills I took, but I'll be okay. Raise your hands if you're going insane. If you're feeling so depressed, you wanna blow out your brains, and you've been to darker places you won't try to explain, but still you try to keep it moving, then we're probably the same. We used to get high like trucks on lift kits. Then I woke up and I said, fuck this shit. I made a promise to myself, mad rip shit. Slide through your verse like a Tokyo drift kid. From being at the doctor's on pills like please help me, to being on the hospital floor like please kill me. And I ain't scared to die except there's nothing to inherit. And I owe lots of people money, including my parents. I'm trying to sit right, but I have mental interference, cause I got inner demons that are screaming out my lyrics. And I'm new to this new game where kids out talk shit. That's why I'm writing rhymes that even they can't fuck with. Let me do a show, let me catch somebody chuckle, I won't stop it.
Hey folks, y'all know that saying, money is the root of all evil. I think hey folks, y'all know that saying, money is the root of all evil. I think it's a saying actually in the Bible. Money is the root of all evil, man. The things that people do for money, especially, I understand, like, if you're in a desperate situation, and you're broke, and you're trying to provide for your family.
$100 bill ain't enough to pay the light bill and get a light bill. I'm dope, but I need a mic wheel. So broke, now tell me how you feel. Yeah, $100 Benji ain't enough to pay for a Benzie. Got me in a frenzy, the world going bad in the Benzie. I'm feeling like Spud on McKenzie. $100 yard, always overdraft on my card. Life's so hard, and I'm not large. If the best things are free, then why do they charge me? Yeah, $100 power, but not enough to pay for a vowel. I feel I might fail. I'm just so hungry on my house, but they ask who like it's a now.
You think that what you for money? You got some straight niggas out there that's straight as fuck.
Yeah.
I do it all for money. And that was their only choice. You gotta leave with that one.
Options. Book your appointment at Meineke.ca. Terms and conditions apply. Engine, brakes, tires, oil. Meineke, doing car care right.
Going beyond the hashtags and headlines. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
What? Like a dentist, had to learn how to hop fences, and now they won't let me in the entrance.
Were fired into a BMW sitting outside. The gang unit has joined the Burnaby RCMP in the investigation. It's not clear if this is connected to a series of gang-related shootings around Metro Vancouver in the last few weeks.
Well,
the U.S. Centers for Disease Control is telling Americans who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19 that they can stop wearing masks. But Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Howard New, says he expects masks to be worn as a last line of defense against the illness into the fall.
For something like the face mask, I would say that would be probably one of the last things to go. I think it's just a good practice to keep on right until the fall, until obviously hopefully everyone
I feel like I'm in a gangster movie. Everywhere I look, every car, somebody's got a bandana.
Dr. New says it won't be easy to determine whether the COVID-19 pandemic can be declared officially over, saying he believes the illness will likely be with us for some time in one form or another, perhaps even for years. The military general leading Canada's vaccine rollout says the country will have enough of the AstraZeneca vaccine
situation at AstraZeneca is evolving.
Thanks.
Difficult assignments. Don't miss the next exciting adventure.
Ow.
These right.
Well, for those who want a second dose of AstraZeneca or who cannot take an mRNA vaccine.
Fortan's comments come as several provinces have stopped giving doses of the first doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, citing a rare but serious blood clotting issue linked to the shot. Ontario's stay-at-home order has been extended until at least June 2nd. Global's Dave Woodard reports.
Just hang in there we aren't asking a lot.
Premier Doug Ford says it's just another 2 weeks of a stay-at-home order before allowing some activities to return.
I expect that by June 2nd, so long as we stay the course, we will be able to reopen outdoor recreation.
After which he says he hopes we'll be able to start reopening the province.
If we manage the next few weeks properly, I believe that we can have things in a very good place this summer.
Neither the Premier or the province's medical officer of health gave details on what data we'll need to see in order to move out of the stay-at-home order June 2nd. Dave Woodard at Global News.
Premier Jason Kenney has kicked 2 senior members of his United Conservative Party out of caucus after they openly challenged his leadership. Caucus Chair Todd Lowen said Kennedy needs to resign for failing on leadership issues across the board and for pushing backbench members to the sidelines. Backbencher Drew Barnes, who has been a loud critic of the province's health restrictions, supported Lowen's statement. Caucus Whip Mike Ellis explained the decision to eject the 2 senior party members by saying there's no room for division during this critical stage of the fight against COVID-19. In sports, just one all-Canadian matchup in the NHL. It was a late and rather meaningless regular season tilt between the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks. Calgary winning this one at 4-1. Both teams eliminated from playoff contention. And the Colorado Avalanche lock up the President's Trophy as the league's top regular season team with a 5-1 win over the LA Kings.
100 and 200 get the loss and then 4 get the European that course and I never care what a horse says. $100 I make it rain $12 the nice dollars. I'm in Miami with a house and that's what it costs for that COVID kitchen birdie.
Shout out to
We're pulling an all-nighter all across Canada. It's The Shift with Shane Hewitt.
Hey, folks. Good morning. Thank you for listening to The Shift. It is time to connect with our favorite Sasquatch from Penticton, British Columbia. Steve Stebbing is here, and it's time for What the Hell. Should we watch this weekend? I jest, because you can't see young Steven like I can. And he is a bearded gentleman with he's got the long locks and all things Okanagan, really.
Yeah, but I mean, the common thing is I blur in photographs like Sasquatch does as well. So.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bond we share.
You also leave giant footprints around. Don't know what that means.
I do.
One of those. How was your week, Steve? Did you get off the couch and get outside in the nice spring weather, or were you watching the shows all week?
I did a bit. Well, I got my vaccine, my first shot of the vaccine on Monday, so that evening was a little bit of a write-off. But it was a good opportunity to lay down and watch a whole bunch and get caught up. But yeah, I mean, the weather is improving quite a bit out here, and I think we're heading into like plus 30 and for the weekend. So yeah, it's good times for sure.
Well, isn't that an invitation? If you have been waffling on the should I get my vaccination or not, Steve Stebbing says, great excuse to watch some TV shows. So let's get started. New releases and Spiral.
How much money you got? A lot. How many products you got? A lot. How many people have died? A lot. All available units. Officer down. Ready to drop. Detective Banks en route.
Education sector is undergoing a major shakeup. To find out more, we're going behind the scenes at classrooms in both the virtual and the real world.
CRI.
Then add in your mushroom. Something fun. Something more.
Studio Plus. Hello and welcome to Studio Plus Community Live from Beijing. I'm Li Ningjing. With me is Liu Min.
Hello everyone. Hello Ningjing.
Hello Liu Min. Coming up in this hour, we will take a look at the freight train services linking China and Europe and how this system will boost the regional trade. Also, how to type by just thinking. We'll take a look at a kind of microchip inserted in the brain, turning your thoughts into text on the computer. That's really, really cutting-edge technology, I think.
Indeed. And also, we've got some cool songs for you. You can listen to us live on chinaplus.cri.cn, or you can find us on Apple Podcast by searching for Studio Plus. We're on Facebook too, so make sure you leave a comment on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. And now to kick off this hour, let's go to a song by Rihanna featuring Jay-Z, Talk That.
Thank you for listening to KCRW. You're tuning in during our spring fundraiser, KCRW's Drive to the Future. We're all looking forward to a better, brighter tomorrow. Help secure KCRW's place in the future we all share. Donate now at kcrw.com/give. And thank you.
Students, we heard and saw on the news how terrible the situation is for both sides. It's becoming a little bit dangerous here. So we're leaving, but we came just to help.
Overhead, there are police helicopters. Extra police officers were drafted in after a state of emergency was declared in Lod, and they've been enforcing a nighttime curfew. But in the old city here, Arab Israelis, Palestinian citizens of Israel, don't trust the security forces to protect them. They show me videos of Jewish extremists on the rampage. It was very scary and regrettable. They attacked us, they torched our cars and houses, they threw stones, says Shireen, hugging her young daughter. This needs to be fixed by the mayor, by the government. We beg them to stop this. Rapping in Hebrew as well as Arabic, the popular Palestinian artist Tamar Nafar is from Lod. In his songs, he raises questions of nationalism. He says Arabs are treated as second-class citizens and that festering social problems help drive the recent violence.
You know what? I was surprised when it happened, the way it escalated, but I'm not shocked. Living here, it's living in a state that defines itself as a Jewish state, and you're talking about the discrimination from all point of views, from housing, unemployment, you're talking about education. I can go on and on and on and on.
As I leave Lud, videos start circulating on social media showing guns being fired. Israel hasn't seen such widespread unrest in its cities for decades, and it's likely to end the latest round of fighting with Gaza far sooner than the divisions that have been laid bare here.
The BBC's Yolande Nell in Lod in Israel.
And that's the situation in Lod, but we've also been hearing allegations on Newsday this morning that police in Israel have been turning a blind eye to Jewish right-wing mobs in towns and cities across the country, breaking curfew and in some instances escorting mobs, the police, allowing them to attack Israeli Arabs and break into their homes and enter mosques. I put these accusations a little while ago to the Israeli police spokesman, Mickey Rosenfeld.
The Israeli National Police are being located and are responding to Israeli Arab violence across the country from the north, from the city of Akko, through Wadi Ara area, which is central Israel, into Ramle, where Lod area is, which is the main area where we are dealing with confrontations, as well as Jerusalem and further down into Beersheba. We have seen thousands of Israeli Arabs towards the end of the Ramadan period take the law in their own hands, attack Israelis, attack Jewish homes, burn police vehicles, attack police officers, open fire at police officers. Our units have responded by using only non-lethal weapons and stun grenades in every location. We are responding to hundreds of emergency calls that are coming in the majority of them coming from Jewish people who have been attacked, Jewish homes that have been totally destroyed. And I can tell you that the situation and the reason why we have claimed the city of Lod as an emergency city is because we're not talking about neighborhood fighting against neighborhood. We're talking about building to building, door to door, because the fact that the different communities live closely together.
Right. What about those specific charges then? Not just escorting far-right groups, but allowing them...
Can we hear about the freight trains?
With 7,374 containers sent to a range of destinations, and that's according to the China Railway Shenyang Group, the regional branch of China State Railway Group, China's national railway operator. And an advisor to the Liaoning government, Qiao Jun, said that in addition to mechanical equipment and chemical products produced in Liaoning, the long-distance trains carry electronic accessories manufactured by companies in Japan and the Republic of Korea. And he said, to a certain extent, the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has boosted demand for daily necessities in Europe, and that further highlights the market competitiveness of China-Europe cargo train services provided by rail operators in Liaoning, and also the province's location in the center of Northeast Asia. So it seems like this rail service has really been helpful in connecting many of the businesses located in China and those in Europe.
Yeah, indeed. And also with the unique geographical advantages, Liaoning, this province is the bridgehead for China to increase the economic and trade cooperation with many countries and places surrounding China. And Liaoning is also the only province in northeast China to have coastal, riverside, and national waters, which actually has given it an edge in opening up. And the connection on the land through this kind of services, this kind of network, is actually very helpful to boost the trade between China and the European countries and also many other places surrounding China. So the freight train services, we know that most of the time the cargo, the products, shipping back and forth between China and European countries, normally they would adopt the freight train service nowadays, and actually has given these two regions, an alternative rather than you just take the ship or you take the air freight cargo plane. At least during the COVID-19 pandemic, if you use the freight train services, then it gives you some more edges for you to continuously to do the trade between each other.
Yes, exactly. For the transportation tools, sometimes we can use the air service, sometimes we can use the rail freight trains, and sometimes if you are transporting large commodities or large cargoes, then sometimes you can use the shipping services. But each services would have its own advantages. For example, if you would like to ship some big furnitures, then probably the shipping service would be the cheapest if you're not in a hurry sending the furniture to somewhere in Europe. That could be quite it has its merits, because the price would be
your IKEA furniture say made in China on the bottom?
It's not too expensive, it's not too cheap, but it's definitely way cheaper than the
If this goes haywire, blame the new guy.
All right, so TV recommendations, that's helpful.
really slow. You won't be very speedily arrive at the destination.
Stockbroker or go log on and sell them. If you suddenly need the money from buying a painting like this, you can't just sell it immediately. There's an awful lot of costs involved. You know, you need the money quickly. Don't buy a painting, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
True. This is true, but you assume it's somebody who's a real lover of art and a lover of Picasso who'd you know, fork out that amount of money. It's not the highest price though fetched by a Picasso, is it?
No, I think we're talking about 199 million for 180 million for one of the Woman of Algiers series that Picasso painted. That was a few years back. But don't remember, forget, if you've got the money to spend that, you probably do have the money to do things like spend on insurance. You're going to be talking about $100,000 a year just for insurance on that. You can't just really add it onto your household insurance.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Andrew Wood, for that.
Million or 100.
Now, let's turn our mind to what's been happening in the United States, where more than 130 U.S. personnel have suffered brain injuries in what the Pentagon fears could be so-called directed energy attacks. Now, the mysterious brain injury started in 2016 after dozens of Americans became ill in Havana in Cuba, leading to the injuries being called Havana syndrome. But the number of cases affecting U.S. staff abroad has now been growing. Eric Schmidt of the New York Times has been covering the story.
Right now, my colleagues and I have identified more than 130 cases, which is about twice as many as previously identified. About 5 years ago, these cases started cropping up first in Cuba, as you mentioned, in Havana, and then later in China. And it affected various American government personnel, diplomats, intelligence officers, and eventually even some military service members. And this included symptoms, headaches, nausea. It's been quite a mystery. There have been a number of attempted studies of this to try and determine what the cause of this is, and it really has not been identified. Some in the Pentagon believe it's the work of one of the Russian intelligence agencies, the notorious GRU, but there's still no hard proof about this.
And I remember 5 years ago when it was first reported, and probably it was New York Times that we spoke to at the time, some even poo-pooed the idea that there could be anything such as a Havana syndrome, the idea that anybody could claim that they were being physically affected by something which is so intangible. So maybe now that there's been more on it and of course more cases as you described, can you explain to people how it's affected people physically?
We identify one case, a newly reported case of a U.S. Military personnel overseas who was in his car with his 2-year-old son. He pulled up to the intersection, and all of a sudden, he was overcome by nausea and headaches, and his son, who was in the back seat of the car, began crying. As soon as the officer pulled away from the intersection, his nausea stopped, and the child stopped crying. So they both later received medical attention from the government, but it's still not clear if they've suffered long-term debilitating effects. This is the kind of thing where in some cases it's a passing thing, in other cases it's been persistent and an enduring problem as they've been scrutinized by doctors. But again, the cause is still somewhat of a mystery.
And the fact that they're saying that these are brain injuries, that in itself is so disturbing. And the fact that as young as a 2-year-old, an innocent child has now been affected. Obviously, the security services are investigating this, and I assume they don't want to reveal everything. But do they see the mere fact that they're putting all of these in the same category, what happened in China, in Russia, in Havana, have they been able to talk about any common thread?
Now, the Biden administration is trying to kind of strike a careful balance between showing officials, who have suffered through this, that they're taking the issue seriously. And in fact, the CIA has formed a new targeting cell, a new task force to try and gather more information about these episodes, how they occurred, and who's responsible. But they also don't want to, incite any kind of panic, either within the government or among the public. Whatever it is that's causing this, and again, they now think it is some kind of common thread, common phenomenon, perhaps some kind of directed energy or microwave weapon. It's obviously not something you can see. And when it happens, it leaves these effects without any telltale signs of its origins. And so that's, again, what part of the mystery of all this. Now, the Russians have denied they're responsible for this. So because it's happened in different places around the world. There were some incidents just in the last few months, one even near the White House in Washington. These episodes are now popping up over a number of places.
The symptoms that these people have experienced, are they debilitating?
Absolutely. The severity of these brain injuries has ranged widely. Some victims have had chronic, potentially irreversible symptoms and pain, suggesting potentially permanent brain injury. Physicians at Walter Reed Medical Center here in the Washington area have warned government officials that some victims are at risk of suicide because of these persistent symptoms that they just won't go away.
Eric Schmidt of the New York Times.
Newsday on the BBC World Service, and I want to talk now about a cultural shift taking place. For a long time, it's been a common belief that natural foods, materials and products are better for people and better for the environment. But this conviction appears to be slowly changing as more and more people turn to the artificial in their search for products produced in environmentally friendly ways. To discuss this shift, I call Virginia Postrel, Bloomberg columnist and author of The Fabric of Civilization.
I don't think this is
Well,
real.
we've had this idea, actually goes back all the way to the late 18th century romantics who rejected industrialism, that what's given is good, nature is good, what's made, what's artificial is suspicious, especially if it's recent and we're not used to it. And this certainly has grown since the first Earth Day 50 years ago, 50 plus now. But we're starting to see a change in that. And what's interesting, especially, is that much of it comes from environmental concerns. So people are starting to realize that in many cases, the most friendly to nature, in some sense, processes are very high-tech processes that are quite artificial, but gentler on the planet, use less energy, or they are more humanitarian. They have an ethical appeal as well.
So to preserve the natural, go artificial.
Yes, there is a bit of that. Yes.
Yeah, which is a funny idea. I mean, give us some examples of this. Diamonds. You don't have to mine diamonds anymore.
Right. So the diamonds was the occasion for my Bloomberg column, because Pandora, the big international jeweler, announced that it would no longer use any mined diamonds, because today, now, industrial diamonds that are manufactured have been around for decades, but only in recent years have you been able to create real gem diamonds. And these are not imitation diamonds. They are actual diamonds. They are structurally, chemically, optically the same as mined diamonds. And they are created in these incredible high-tech chambers with plasmas that are 10,000 degrees, using technologies that lay down layer by layer by layer, 10 billion layers of atoms. Technologies that were originally developed to make computer chips and photovoltaic solar materials, but are now being used to make diamonds. And it's still a small part of the market, but even though it uses a lot of energy in the process, so does mining.
I'm listening to that, and I'm hearing layers and layers and high tech and all that. I'm thinking this is going to be expensive, and it might not even be better for the planet.
Well, first of all, they are less expensive. And the reason has to do with the fact that there's less waste in terms of the less low value diamonds. So what this produces are rough diamonds that still need to be cut and polished, just like mine diamonds. But when you go into a mine and you dig out diamonds, you dig out all kinds of diamonds. Some of them may be gorgeous giant gems, but most of them are small. They're not necessarily great colors, all this stuff. So this is a more efficient process of getting the kind of gem quality diamonds that people want. So it turns out, even though on average, if you just look at all carats treating the same, it's more expensive. It turns out when you get down to the retail level, it's significantly less expensive, and similarly with the energy use. Okay. So it's very interesting the way that comes out. And then you're looking at other types diamonds were the occasions for this, but there are other things. There's a lot going on with bioengineering yeast to produce various substances that people would like. So it's used in perfumes and in flavors. So instead of having to use enormous amounts of land and fertilizer and chop down trees and all of that sort of thing, you could just teach yeast to secrete the specific molecule.
Gosh, that's Virginia Postrel, Bloomberg columnist, author of The Fabric of Civilization. Yeah, just thinking about a sort of celebration of the future. You get engaged with your fake diamond, you put on some artificial silk for the party, and then you eat a fake burger grown in a lab. Yeah.
Interesting. Do text us and tell us what you think about it. You know, if you're aiming for this artificial, because it's ethical. We'd love to hear from you. +44 7786 20 50 85. And somebody who's already used that text number, but on a totally different subject. Gerard Ofori Amankwahin in Ghana says, isn't it strange that people in the US, this is related to Houston and Texas, are reluctant to shoot a dangerous wandering tiger and yet express no hesitation to shoot a fellow human being?
Yeah, and Bono, we've also had a reaction into that story about potential controls on social media in Mauritius.
Oh. Somebody might own that tiger and might shoot you.
They're obviously in the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. They're performing with the counties passed back in 2017. So who's going to sing? Well, it's a Canadian. She's amazing. You got to check out her deep cut albums, not just the big hits. I don't want to spoil it yet. So what I have done is created a little...
Easy.
Oh, keep your hands where they are, Brill. Go. All right, Chester, take their guns. Yes, sir. I'm arresting you for murder, Brill. The rest of them with you.
Killed my brother. Got him in the back. My brother then murdered him.
You know something? If I wasn't the marshal, I'd do the same thing to you right now. It's too bad I can't. I hope it hurts when they hang you, Brill. And it was over. And I got the feeling like it never happened. That there hadn't been time for it to happen.
Hello and welcome to Newsday from the BBC World Service with Bola Mosu and James Copnott.
Coming up, we'll cross over to our reporter in Israel as conflict there enters a fifth day.
Fighting has displaced thousands once more in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
We'll be in Nairobi, where judges have ruled against the bill to amend Kenya's constitution.
And we'll hear how parents in the United States are unsure about getting their children vaccinated against COVID. First the news.
Good. Somebody has to fucking say something about that.
BBC News with Moira Alderson. Israel has subjected Gaza to its heaviest bombardment yet, striking with ground and naval forces as well as from the air. The Israeli army said the operation...
What is Black Sabbath with Dio replacing Ozzy? When
3 more rocket volleys overnight. Intercommunal disturbances have continued in Israeli cities where Jews and Arabs live side by side. The police say Israeli Arabs have been responsible for most of the trouble and reject accusations that they are standing by while gangs of Jewish youths target Arab homes. The Turkish company Kopowership, which operates floating power plants, is shutting down the supply of electricity to Lebanon because of payment arrears. Its 2 ships supply a quarter of Lebanon's power. The holding company says it hasn't been paid for 18 months by Lebanon, which is in a deep economic crisis. President Biden has welcomed the decision to allow Americans fully vaccinated against the coronavirus to stop using face masks, calling it a milestone in the battle against the pandemic. Mr. Biden said those eligible to put aside their masks had earned the right to flash their smiles again. A rise in the number of people in England infected with the Indian variant of coronavirus has led ministers to consider speeding up the delivery of second vaccines. Public Health England said cases had more than doubled in a week to 1,300. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will open a synagogue today at Babyn Yar, the site of one of the worst massacres of the Second World War. Nazi troops murdered more than 33,000 Jews over 2 days in September 1941 at the ravine just outside Kiev. More than 100,000 people were killed there over 2 years. That's the latest BBC News.
Thank you very much for that news. Hello and welcome to Newsday on the BBC with James and Bola. We'll be talking about renewed fighting in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Also why the Kenyan High Court has ruled against a change to the country's constitution. And we hear from a woman who is made to wear a COVID mask here in the UK while giving birth.
In the Middle East, Israel has deployed tanks and troops to its border with Gaza as it mulls whether to launch a ground operation in the territory after days of violence. Conflict raged throughout Thursday and indeed the night as Palestinian militants fired rockets into Israel and the Israeli army. For more, we can speak to our correspondent Paul Adams in Jerusalem. Good morning, Paul. Is it true to say that this was the heaviest night of airstrikes on Gaza yet?
I think it's difficult to tell, to be honest. I think what is the case is that there was an operation during the night which involved some very, very intense gunfire, both from the air, the sea and from land. So artillery fire being used perhaps for the first time in addition to the more precise airstrikes. And that does seem to have created, in the space of less than an hour, a real sense of panic and a feeling that a ground invasion was imminent. So we saw hundreds of Palestinians who live in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, close to the border with Israel, fleeing further down into the Strip for safety. Now, the Israeli military says that no ground forces entered the Gaza Strip during that operation and that it was targeting a network of Hamas tunnels underneath the Strip, which the Israeli military believes housed quite a bit of Hamas's military infrastructure. It was clearly a very intense operation. It is over. The consequences of it are being assessed. But at the moment, as it stands, no ground operation.
Because you can't have your ground troops there while you're
clearly there, though. Is it your sense that that would be welcomed by a majority of Israelis?
I think if you talk to people living in the communities in southern Israel close to the Gaza Strip, there would be definitely a view that that should happen. I heard a gentleman being interviewed yesterday from one of those communities who said that, frankly, he wanted the Israeli military to go in and wipe Gaza out altogether. And these are sentiments that you often hear at this time because those people in places like Sderot are fed up with being constantly told to go and run for shelters and having very little time to get into them. But I think the Israeli military will obviously take a rather more hard-nosed and pragmatic approach to this. They feel that they are achieving quite a lot through their current operations, that they are destroying a lot of what they want to destroy. They're also highlighting the fact that they are killing people they describe as senior military officials from both Hamas and the other militant group Islamic Jihad. And so for the time being, I think the military imperative for a ground operation is not necessarily there, particularly as they know perfectly well that were they to launch such an operation, you'd be looking at thousands of casualties, not scores of casualties, and also, you know, more danger to Israeli troops involved. So lots of reasons not to do it.
Weeks like this, you could say, tend to happen every few years or so. Give us a little bit of historical perspective on what that might suggest could come next.
The Israelis have a term they sometimes use. It's rather kind of a cynical term, but they call it cutting the grass. And they feel that every now and again the grass gets a little long in the Gaza Strip and they need to go in and cut it. This would appear to be one of those moments. Now, it has been triggered, it has to be said, by the fact that Hamas decided to make its presence felt by launching rockets in defense, as Hamas argues, of Palestinians in Jerusalem. But clearly, the Israeli military has been ready for this moment, and it feels that this is one of those moments when it needs to go and degrade Hamas to the point where it no longer poses any kind of imminent threat. In the absence of any kind of longer-term solution, that frankly is what the two sides seem destined to do, to go at it every few years, in the knowledge that in a few more years' time, they're going to have to go through it all over again.
Our correspondent Paul Adams in Jerusalem there.
Next to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the army says thousands of people have fled fighting there between rival militias in the east of the country. On Wednesday, a major clash occurred in South Kivu province between an armed group called Biloze Bijambuke and an ethnic Tutsi group of fighters. About 5,000 people are now seeking refuge on a plain north of Uvira city. While dozens of armed groups operate in the east of the country, despite the presence of a large United Nations force and the Congolese military. Earlier, I spoke to Michael Dibert, who's a journalist and author of Democratic Republic of Congo Between Hope and Despair.
Well, it's happening in a province known as South Kivu, which is, as you said, in the far eastern part of Congo. And that part of the country, South Kivu, North Kivu, Ituri, is a place that's been racked by violence pretty much continuously for over 20 years. And the fighting that's going on right now, that's been displacing a lot of people in South Kivu recently, is between one local militia, the Biloze Bishambuke, and the Twig Waheno, who are Banyamulenge, or Congolese Tutsi militia.
The Banyamulenge have been a fighting force for many years. Why has this fighting erupted between these two groups? What sparked it?
The battle between these guys has been going on in kind of fits and starts for quite a number of years, unfortunately. And it's actually, in some ways, I'd say, heated up since the beginning of the presidency of Tshisekedi, who took over from the long-ruling Joseph Kabila, who had ruled the country for about 20 years. And, the thing is, in this part of the country, you have a lot of bleed over into the border of Congo of different armed groups from Burundi and Rwanda, and also Uganda, the ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces, which is in North Kivu, which is really causing a lot of havoc. So you've unfortunately had these battles been going on for a long time, and the authority of the state, with the exception of, for kind of brief periods, has never really been able to assert itself.
We understand that, thousands have been displaced, which unfortunately also isn't new in the area, but the fighting is. And, given that we know MONUSCO have been, rather, it sounds as if their hands have been tied behind their back, or that they haven't been able to fulfill their complete mandate. But also in terms of the national army themselves, this is a perennial problem, having not just the Banyamulenge, but different ethnic groups in the region that they just can't control.
Yes, and I think, one of the big questions that is ongoing right now is it seems like the government in Kinshasa, which is, many, many miles away from the area we're talking about, still seems to think that these ongoing disputes can be solved by an almost purely military approach. And that has not worked in the past, and I don't see why people might think it would work now, because there's been a fraying of the fabric of society since the mid-90s in this part of the country. And I think most people who observe it think it requires a much more wide-ranging and encompassing approach than simply just one of lead.
And whose hands, does that ultimately fall into? Because, if the Congolese army and the Congolese government seem overwhelmed, if you like, by what's happening, and also the UN forces also don't seem to be able to keep it under control, what's the next step?
I think, one thing that a lot of people who observe the region have been hoping for would there be a kind of, because there's so much overlap of different groups going, back and forth across the borders in that extremely porous region, that there would be some kind of encompassing international approach to try and get things straightened out there, which we've seen attempts to do in the past, but none of them have been particularly effective. One of the reasons also I think that in this part of the country that things are so hard to get a grip is that, it's extremely mountainous and extremely remote. It's not a very easy area to patrol regularly. And as a result, you have all of these armed groups who are kind of running their little fiefdoms that they have.
Michael Dibert, journalist and author of Democratic Republic of Congo Between Hope and Despair.
Newsday on the BBC World Service. Children as young as 12 are now eligible for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine in the United States, but many Americans are hesitant, especially when it comes to vaccinating their kids. The BBC's Reagan Morris talks with parents in California about why they will or won't be vaccinating their children.